Okay, sorry for that. Technology can be an issue. Are you able to see the presentation clearly?
Yes.
Okay, I hope we are good. Sorry for that. And for those who have just joined us, I am CHRP Alice Musyoka. And today we are looking at what is performance management, what is productivity management, understanding results chain, productivity measurement, approaches to productivity measurement, methodologies of productivity measurement, productivity improvement techniques and tools, factors affecting employee productivity. We will also look at the waste management. Then we finalize with monitoring, evaluation, and reporting. I'm sorry for the technical hitch, but I'm guided. I think it's sorted now with the admin. So the course objectives, we are going to discuss the relationship or the nexus between performance management and productivity management. We will look at the results chain. We will discuss productivity measurement, identify the approaches to productivity measurement, explain methodologies of productivity measurement, discuss strategies and tools for improving productivity at the workplace, identify and discuss productivity improvement techniques and tools, and identify factors affecting employee productivity, discuss different approaches to waste management, discuss productivity monitoring, evaluation, and reporting. So we look at performance, and we have said it refers to execution or accomplishment of work. In business, it refers to the achievement of desired goals, objectives, standards, and targets, and is typically measured using key performance indicators. Performance is a measure of effectiveness and can be measured in terms of quality, quantity, speed, and accuracy. And so we look at the difference between effectiveness and efficiency. Effectiveness is doing the right things, and efficiency is doing things right the first time. Looking at both the effectiveness and efficiency, we say they are both aspects are very crucial for organizational success, and understanding their distinction helps organizations make informed decisions and improve overall effectiveness. So business measures of performance can take the form of business accomplishments, such as customer satisfaction. I know at our workplaces, most of us look at customer satisfaction, customer experience. We look at the measures such as lead time. We look at cycle time or the turnaround time. And we look at quality achievements, etc., etc. So I hope you are following very well. In case there's a hitch, you can just unmute and say what the issue is. Looking at performance management is a continuous process of identifying, measuring, and developing the performance of individuals and teams, and aligning their performance with the strategic goals of the organization. Performance management responds to the question of how an organization can actualize its goals through goal alignment. The elements of an effective performance management system are as illustrated below. So these are the key elements of effective management system, and I believe most of us are familiar with this. The step number 1, we look at a performance management policy. It's good to have a policy in place which guides in, a policy is a guideline which will now guide on how the process of performance management is done. And so that is very key because we all know that performance management issues can arise, especially when it comes to appraisals and rewards and recognition. We can have issues around that. So it's good to have a policy, a clear policy in place. Then we have goal and expectation setting. This is a very crucial step because both employee and supervisor need to agree on the goals and the expectations. And when we talk about goals, under it we have objectives. So both the employee and supervisor need to agree on objectives. They need to agree on the targets so that at the end of the performance period, when it comes to measuring performance, both the employee and supervisor are clear about what the agreed targets were, what the objectives were, and what the goals are. So that is a very key step. And I don't know whether in our organizations, whether you have encountered a situation where an employee says that I don't own these targets. The targets were imposed on me. Have we ever come across such kind of experience? Targets being imposed on employees, meaning they are dictated, it is top, bottom. They are not agreed upon. They are dictated from the top. Have we encountered that? Someone unmute yourself and say whether you have encountered that. It is very important
Hi, good morning.
for...
Alice?
Yes, morning.
Yes, I've encountered that I sit in a group setting, so that happened to one of our businesses, our affiliate, and it was actually a HR practitioner. So they called and they asked me. It was one of the HR managers, and I said that was wrong. That you're not supposed to impose targets on people. You should let people prepare their own targets and make their own performance contracts. Okay, performance management contracts, yes. So yes, I've encountered it. So I had to actually talk to them because I had cascaded the overall group strategy to them. Not strategy, yes, and performance contract. So they needed to fit theirs into what mine kind of looked like. So yes, it has happened. I've experienced it quite a number of times, including that particular incident. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much for sharing that. Someone else? It is usually a very difficult situation when an employee feels that the targets have been imposed on them, meaning there was no discussion between the supervisor and the employee. They did not sit together to agree on the targets, to agree on the objectives. So that's why I'm saying this is a very crucial stage, because at the end of the day, even the KPIs, how to measure that performance, if it is the key performance indicators, both the supervisor and the employee need to agree so that the employee feels that they are actually in control of what they are doing and how their work is going to be measured. Essentially, a for a KPI to be a good KPI, then the employee who is performing in that role should have some control, because if someone is measuring an objective for which you have no control, it becomes very tricky. In fact, at the end of the day, it cannot yield any performance, because the person that may not even have the data. They should be in control of the activities and the outcomes thereof, so that they are able also to prepare the data. If they cannot access, if they have no control of the data and they have no source of the data that is required, then you realize that performance will become a challenge. Okay, let's move to step number 3, progress monitoring. So after a supervisor and employee have agreed on the goals, the objectives and the targets thereof, and the KPIs, then now we continue performing, and then we monitor the progress. So there's monitoring of the performance, and in monitoring performance, we need to do coaching, because sometimes there could be gaps. You realize that an employee is not able to perform to the expected level. So you need to do performance coaching under step 3, and you need to have a tool for monitoring that performance. It could be a balance scorecard tool, or it could be any other tool that you have in the organization. I don't know what tools we use in managing performance. Can someone share? The organization where I work myself, we use balance scorecard tool. So can we hear what other tools are being used for managing performance in our organizations? Someone unmute yourself and share. It is good to have an interactive session, because we are here to share ideas and to have a wonderful learning experience. I'm only facilitating. I know we are all CHRPs, and we all have very good ideas to share. So can you let us know, someone, what tool you are using in your organization in performance management? Okay, if no one is ready to share, then we move to the next stage, and that is performance appraisal or performance evaluation. This is a very, very crucial stage again. And as I said from the beginning, it's good to have a policy so that we don't have disputes arising from performance appraisals. I know there can be issues here around the relationship between the supervisor and the employee. Some employee may say that my supervisor doesn't like me, and that's why they are not giving me the correct score. But you realize that if the process is done properly, and the tool that is being used and the way of measuring the performance is objective, you realize that that will sort out most of the issues arising from performance appraisals. And so the best practice is that both the employee and the supervisor need to sit and evaluate performance. And there should be no surprises, because all along during the performance period, the supervisor and the employee have been discussing performance. And so there are no surprises arising at this level if performance is managed very well. So you realize that if there are any hitches that were there, or resources that were not availed, as we expect employees to perform, we also need to provide the resources. So if resources were not availed, we expected that before the appraisal period, that will have been sorted out during the progress and monitoring. In case the employee is experiencing challenges, that will have been sorted out through performance coaching. And so the discussion around appraisal should be smooth, essentially. And the supervisor should be keen to ensure that what you are evaluating or what you are appraising is purely performance. You don't bring other issues of the personality of the employee and such like. Okay, so we move to number 5, stage number 5. This is where we are providing continuous feedback. Feedback again is very key. If you remember a scholar, a management guru by name Peter Drucker. Peter Drucker says, what gets measured gets done. And what gets measured, if you cannot measure something, you cannot manage it. It is hard to control that which you don't measure, according to Peter Drucker, who is a management guru. And this was taken up further by another scholar who said that what gets measured and is fed back, as in where there's feedback, then it is done much better. And what gets rewarded gets repeated. All those are quotes that have been done by several scholars. I'll be able to tell you exactly who said what gets measured and gets rewarded gets done much better. That is John Jones. He said, what gets measured and fed back gets done well, and what gets rewarded gets repeated. And that is very key when it comes to performance management. So here we were looking at feedback. If we ask employees to perform, and we are not giving them any feedback as to how their performance is, you realize that there's going to be a problem there, and they will not feel encouraged to perform even better. And then the next stage, we are talking about employee development plans, which is very key, because one reason we carry out performance appraisals is so that we can be able to identify gaps in performance and be able to put in place the correct interventions. Some performance gaps may require training intervention, but it's not all performance gaps that require training intervention. Some could be needing counseling. Probably the employee has issues at home, and so we need to have a place for counseling, some space on counseling. And then when it comes to employee development plans, we can have a training. As an organization, the organization can carry out training interventions, but there's also the employee himself or herself needs to have that self-development plan, so that they don't just wait for the employer to do training. They should be able to understand what their performance gaps are and be able also to take initiative. And I think this is happening a lot nowadays. You find the employees are taking themselves to colleges to acquire the skills that they feel they need at their workplace. Then we come to the last stage, which is reward and recognition. And we've said that what gets rewarded gets done better. So I know we have challenges around here. I don't know whether we have much time to share, because sometimes you may find that the person who performs well is not the one who is rewarded. Sometimes there can be performance management politics in an organization. But the best practice should be that we should be able to measure performance and be able to distinguish a performer from a non-performer. Otherwise, we would be rewarding the non-performer if we don't measure performance well. And we should be able to reward performance. Reward and recognition is one component in HR that really motivates employees and leads to employee engagement. It boosts employee morale and makes the employees get more engaged and more focused on their work. They are able to perform even much better. Okay, those are the 7 steps. I can invite a comment or two, and then we change gear and move to something else. We move to productivity. I want to invite comments on performance management, and especially on what we've discussed. Probably someone can share their experience, like on rewards and recognition. How do you do rewards and recognition in your organization? Maybe someone can share. Or what issues you have experienced around that. Someone to share?
I can make a comment.
Yes.
Yeah, I think what I've experienced in terms of the rewards and recognition.
Yes.
One, there are times there are cases whereby we end up with a case of probably comparing oranges with bananas, whereby
Yes.
we don't have an equals benchmark or system of comparing, especially in terms of departments. There are
Yes.
some whereby the targets may be very clear.
Yes.
That can be calculated and you actually see this is a performance.
Yes.
But then there are also, because of the nature of the work or the mandate, it is also not very easy to compute what someone has been able to do. So at times you find that it either puts an advantage certain individuals against others because of that lack of a very effective system of comparison, because not everyone can be assessed the same way. You have to be assessed basically on what you are doing, but some are not really easy to come up with the computations on how much you've achieved. Thank you.
Thank you very much for sharing. So we have issues around the measures, the KPIs, the indicators, the units of measure. And some jobs, as you have said, some jobs are qualitative and others are quantitative. So it is very easy to measure a job whose units of measure are can be easily quantified than one where we have jobs that are qualitative. Like even HR, HR is a support department, and you find that in most cases, some of our work is not easily measured. But I think to overcome that challenge, we need to first of all define the KPIs very well. And allow me to say that all jobs can be measured, whether quantitatively or qualitatively. And we need to look at qualitative measures. Like for instance, if you want to measure customer satisfaction, for instance, I know most of our organizations use customer satisfaction surveys. And you know very well, a survey is more of an opinion. People give their opinions and they give their perspectives and their what? More of an opinion. So you find that measuring that can be a challenge, but if you devise good KPIs, it is easy to measure. It is easy to measure, but I know there you may have to use index or indices, which are more like in percentages. They are not absolute numbers as such, but you may use percentages. And I know the challenge that has been there mainly is on how to exceed your expectations if your work is being measured in percentage. How can you go beyond 100% so that you exceed the expectation? So I think to overcome that is to devise clear KPIs, and the units of measure need to be clear so that there's no dispute around that, or such employees don't feel disadvantaged compared to the ones whose role or whose units of measure are quantitative. Someone else to share on that? No one else would like to share on performance management, because I want us to change gear and move to productivity. We see what is productivity, and then we look at productivity measurement. Okay. We can agree that you record questions. If you have questions, you can record them. I know most of them are likely to be answered as we progress, so that we can take the questions at the end of the training. I think we are in agreement on that. Okay. So we look at what is productivity. I had said that there was a conference at Bomas of Kenya recently. It was in April, where SRC and other parties were discussing about productivity in the government, in the ministries, in the public service rather. And the discussion was around the wage bill. So we are going to understand that when we go through this. So what is your understanding of productivity? What does productivity mean? I brought this elephant. I know most of you have seen it elsewhere. When you look at an elephant such as this one, someone is holding at the tail. Another one is holding the trunk. Another one the ears. Another one the legs. And this is how we can describe productivity. People have different perspectives about productivity, and productivity means different things to different people. So let's look at how consumers would define productivity. To a consumer, productivity should bring good quality products and services at cheaper price or prices, and they should bring higher living standards. So when we say to a consumer, productivity should bring good quality, that reminds me of my lecturer at the university who taught me about TQM, Total Quality Management. And one thing that my lecturer taught me is that quality is defined by the customer. Quality is defined by the customer. And she would give an example. If today you went to a tailor to measure a trouser or a dress, and then you gave your specs to this tailor, you said, I want this dress or this trouser to be done like this, like this, like this. And the tailor even draws the measurements. and records your measurements. And then come the day you are going to pick the dress or the trouser, you realize, you try to fit it and it looks like it's a different thing altogether. It was not done to your specification. And then when you try to fit it in or on, you tell the tailor, this is not what I wanted. And then the tailor tells you, you look so good in it. It is wonderful. You look so good. You see, they are trying to define quality for you, but you have your own definition of the quality you wanted. So quality is defined by the customer. We need to note that. It is not upon the organization to think that this is how quality should be like. It is what it should look like. It is the customer to dictate what quality is and what quality means to them. Okay, to the workforce, productivity means getting higher wages and benefits and better working conditions and environment. So probably the workforce is holding the tail of the elephant and they say, this is how we understand productivity. To a businessman, productivity is reducing costs and increasing profits. So if a businessman reduces costs and increases profits, that is what productivity is to them. To an economist, productivity is a ratio of output to input of resources that are used in the process of production. To a scientist, productivity is to identify wasteful actions or practices and take corrective measures or corrective action through improvement, technological upgrading of skills, better teamwork, and participation. That is how a scientist would understand productivity. To an executive, productivity is a gross value added, less depreciation of the inputs used in the process of production. So having heard all that, so we ask now the big question, so what is productivity? As a technical concept, the ratio of output produced, which contributes to the accomplishment of the mission per unit of resource utilized, that is the inputs. So we are looking at output input compared to a similar ratio from a base period with the same or increased quality. That is what the technical concept defines. It's how it defines productivity. So we say productivity equals outputs over inputs. When we talk about output, we are talking about value to customers. We are talking about effectiveness divided by inputs, where we are looking at costs to producer, and that is efficiency. So when we talk about costs or resources or inputs, that is now becomes the denominator in this ratio. So you find we are looking at how many units of inputs go into producing 1 unit of output. That is what productivity is. And for those who are good in mathematics, inputs are the denominator. And when the denominator is higher than the numerator, what happens? What is the result? The result is lower, isn't it? As opposed to when the denominator is lower than the numerator. So output becomes the numerator, denominator becomes the inputs. And when we look at productivity as a management concept, we are saying it's a measure of how efficiently and effectively a business or an economy uses inputs to produce outputs, how well resources are used to produce outputs. And as a social concept, we say productivity is a mindset. It's an attitude of mind. It seeks to continuously improve what already exists, so that today, whatever existed yesterday is better today and is made better tomorrow. So the goal, when we look at it as a social concept, the goal of productivity is better quality working life or happiness. Things getting better every time. When we say as a social concept, productivity is a mindset, that is very key. It says a mindset or an attitude of mind. Okay, I think in the public sector, we have had such words as mali ya umma. Hii ni mali ya umma. So let us waste whatever we have because ni mali ya umma. That is a mindset. It's an attitude and not a good attitude. So there cannot be productivity where employees think that hii ni mali ya umma. It is an attitude, a mindset. Or in an organization where employees would say, our company is so rich, we work for a rich company, a mindset. So they begin using resources in a wasteful manner. So there cannot be productivity when people have that mindset. But on the contrary, we can have a mindset where people know or employees know that it is the efficient utilization of their resources that will take the company forward. That also becomes a mindset. So it's very important to think about that. We need to have employees who have the right mindset. Now, so far, if we look at output, for instance, or we can start with inputs, that is the denominator. What would we regard to be inputs in an organization? Come to think of your own organization. What are inputs? We know inputs can be labor, it can be capital, it can be raw materials, it can be energy, it can be time, it can be money. So all those are inputs. And that's why, like when SRC talks about issues of productivity and wage bill, they are looking at inputs in terms of salaries. When you pay people so much money in the public sector, you ask yourself, what is the output? So what are some of the outputs in our organizations? What do you regard as an output? Somebody unmute yourself and tell us some of the outputs in your organization. Output. If someone is in a manufacturing sector or industry, an output could be even a loaf of bread if someone is manufacturing loaves of bread, or it could be what? Any goods that are produced can be an output. And in service industry, sorry, come up.
Yeah, I
Yes.
wanted to say that even the customer service
Yes,
would be an output.
yes, the customer satisfaction. Yes, because that is what you produce at the end of offering the service. You aim at satisfying your customer. Someone else? Output? What do you produce in your organizations? Is it a service or what is it? I know it is easy to measure this when it comes to manufacturing industry because they are dealing with the products which they can measure in terms of numbers. It is easy to quantify. The same issue that George raised, was it George? I think it was George. That some jobs cannot be easily measured because they are not so quantitative. So in service industry, what are our outputs? An output can also be the number of files. If you are handling files, like you can have a target to process how many files, like 40 files in a day. That will be your output. You measure the activity, so as to achieve your goal, to achieve the objectives and the set targets. I know that language can be confusing. We know that goals are broader than objectives, isn't it? So we start with goals, which we can break down to several objectives, which we can break down to several targets. And we use KPIs to measure, key performance indicators. So can we think of some of our KPIs so as we think about the outputs in our organizations? What are the KPIs?
I'd like to
Yes.
contribute on the output of service industry. It could also be return customers or return if it's a hospital patients, if it's retail, basically return customers,
Yes.
and also the growth, also the numbers increasing. It could be return or it could be new customers coming. So basically just the numbers growing. In terms
Yes,
of
yes. Thank you. Thank you for that contribution. So if you want to think of an output, then you think about what is it you are measuring? What is the KPI? What is the unit of measure? The unit of measure can be numbers, can be percentages, can be ratios. If you are in finance, I know some of us measure our KPIs using ratios. So all that becomes an output, isn't it? If you are collecting contributions, can also be an output. The much you have collected, isn't it? Like KRA, if they are collecting the taxes, I know they have measures or KPIs that look into how much is collected. Yes, I think we are clear with that. So productivity equals outputs over inputs. Outputs divided by inputs. So we have to begin to ensure that our inputs are controlled, because if we don't control the inputs or the resources, then our goods or services end up becoming very costly and very pricey. Yeah. And we said to a customer, productivity means what? Quality goods, at good price, isn't it? Let me get back there. To a consumer, productivity will bring good quality products and services and at a cheaper price, leading to higher standards of living. Okay. So I think we are clear on that. And I think the discussion that was there at Bomas was also around productivity as a social concept, the mindset. They were trying to address the issue of attitude and mindset, where people think hii ni mali ya umma. It can never get exhausted. We have too much resources, which is actually not the case. So they were also looking at inputs, the cost. And I think cost has become the center of discussion in most of the organizations. People are trying to look at how can we reduce the cost. So I want to take us back to where we were talking about efficiency we said efficiency is measured in terms of quality, quantity, speed, and accuracy. Mainly, that is how efficiency is measured. Sorry, not efficiency, effectiveness is measured in terms of quality, quantity, speed, and accuracy. And that's how we measure our performance. In all these variables, I hope you are able to see the slide, isn't it? So when we look at quality, quantity, speed, and accuracy, you realize that cost is missing. There's no element of cost when we are talking about performance or performance management. We are not seeing the element of cost coming in. But when it comes to efficiency, the element of cost, when it comes to productivity, the element of cost pops up. And that is what differentiates. It is the main difference between measuring performance and measuring productivity. I hope that is clear. And you realize that in measuring performance, or rather we can ask a question there. We ask, can performance increase without productivity increasing? Can there be increase in performance without increase in productivity? What do you think? Someone unmute yourself and tell us whether there can be increase in performance without increase in productivity. Are we there? Someone, is it possible to have an increase in performance without a matching increase in productivity? Okay, food for thought. We will think about that. So we had said earlier that both effectiveness, that is measuring performance, and measuring productivity, the end goal is what? Is maximization of results. So when we talk about maximizing results, what do we mean results? So I want us to understand the concept of results by looking at the results chain. And what we are seeing on this slide is that in the results chain, results can be in form of outputs, outcome, or impact. But the process or the chain begins with inputs. So we have inputs, which are resources, such as what we have said. It can be labor, capital, materials, raw materials, energy, time, money. So we begin with inputs. And then we come to processes or activities. So processes or activities will help us move inputs to outputs. I think that is clear. It will help us convert inputs to outputs. And then we come to output itself. We are saying it is tangible product or service, which will result from activities or changes or effects that are immediate or in the short term. Output. And we have said output can be measured in the form of activities, or we can be looking at the customer and as to whether they are satisfied or not. So output. Then we come to outcomes. And if you realize from top to bottom, the importance is increasing as we move to the bottom. Or rather, we are starting from the lower level to the higher level. We are starting from the lower level of mere inputs. And then when processing is done or activities take place, the inputs are converted to outputs. And when outputs are further processed, or rather, when products are there or services are produced and they are there as outputs, they change to outcomes. The changes or effects that are affected or that beneficiaries experience are outcomes, which result from the delivery of outputs in the medium term. And then we have impact. And allow me to say that when you are measuring performance or you are measuring results, this level of impact is not for the faint-hearted. It is not easy to measure impact. You have to really work very hard to be able to say what is the impact as part of the results. So I hope we are able to understand the result chain, because as you measure performance, whether you are measuring performance or you are measuring productivity, you need to understand the results chain. You need to understand what are the inputs, what are the processes or activities that you have in your organization, what are the outputs, what are the outcomes, and what is the impact. And allow me to say that for something to be regarded as an outcome, it means something has either increased or decreased. Increased or decreased. For instance, you can increase customer satisfaction. That's an outcome. Or you can decrease their complaints. So in outcomes, something has changed. It has increased or decreased, or something has been modified. And like you as an individual, if you had an objective to reduce your weight, for instance, the outcome of what you do, you go to the gym, you maintain a good diet, such kind of activities, you are able to do what it takes without necessarily taking medication or anything. You realize that if your goal is to reduce weight, the outcome of it, you'll be able to measure to see whether the weight has reduced or increased. That is what I mean when I say with outcomes, something must be modified, something must increase or decrease. Customer satisfaction may go up. That is an outcome. Complaints may reduce. Defects may reduce if we are in a manufacturing industry. Now, the impact coming to the highest level of results is the impact. These are changes or effects on society that result from achieved outcomes in the long run. If you are in the manufacturing industry, for instance, you are producing some goods, like let's say soap, or we can say cooking oil. So what is the impact? You can measure how many bottles you have produced, that is the output. You can measure the outcome. Are your customers happy with your product? You can measure the impact. Impact is the long-term result, the changes or effects on society that result from achieved outcomes in the long run. So the cooking oil that you are producing, what is the long-term effect on the society? Okay, so we move away from there and we talk about what is productivity management. So productivity management is a continuous process involving 4 important phases. Phase number 1, you start with measurement. And you start with measurement because you want to understand the baseline, where you are today. Because you cannot know where you are moving to unless you start by knowing where you are. So to be able to reach where you want to be, you need the baseline. And that's why productivity measurement begins with measurement. Sorry, productivity management begins with measurement, so as you understand the baseline. Then there's the phase 2, where you carry out SWOT analysis. You carry out the root cause analysis and search for opportunities for improvement. And then phase 3, there's the planning, where you set goals to achieve. That is where you want to be in terms of productivity levels. And you measure, that is, you plan how you are going to measure the productivity. Phase number 4 is on execution of implementation, where we have plan, monitoring, and evaluation. So that is on improvement, because the reason you carry out measurement, why we do measure or measurements, it is so that we can identify gaps and so that we can be able to improve or be able to bridge the gaps. So that can only be done now after you have carried out the measurement, and then you come now to improvement by way of monitoring, because you wouldn't know where the gaps are if you are not monitoring and evaluating the productivity. So we move to this demonstration, and it is a framework. The framework for productivity measurement or management is highlighted here, and it is what we've already seen. So we start with, first of all, we create awareness in the organization, because it is hard to talk about productivity measurement or management if you have not created awareness. People need to change their mindset, they need to understand. And for them to change the mindset, they need information, they need awareness. So you start by creating awareness, then you come to productivity measurement, where you establish the baseline. Then you come to productivity analysis. And after you've carried out the analysis, you will need to do a report. There's reporting, which leads to identification of gaps and productivity improvement. That's why you are seeing the arrows from productivity analysis. In between, we have control reporting, and then we have productivity improvement. And then we come to productivity planning, where we review the results of phase 2. We set goals to achieve, and we select alternatives and organize for improvement. So the cycle continues repeating itself, and that's how now we are able to improve on productivity. That's just the framework. Then we come to the measurement itself, because we have said after we have created awareness, we come to productivity measurement. Productivity measurement is the process of collecting, analyzing, and reporting on information regarding productivity. It is a deliberate assessment of the efficiency and efficacy levels of employees, teams, programs, processes, and organizations in their entirety. It is the first step towards improving productivity in an organization that we have seen. Then we come to productivity measures. So productivity measures include labor productivity. So we could be measuring labor productivity, or measuring capital productivity, or measuring added value, or total output. And these are measured in terms of quality, cost, and delivery. In short, we call it QCD. So whenever we talk about productivity, you have to think about these three, the QCD, that is the quality, cost, and delivery. In delivery, we mean delivery of services, goods and services. Okay. So let's look at approaches to productivity measurement. One approach is the single or partial approach, where we are looking at total outputs over inputs, looking at just one factor. For instance, we could be measuring labor productivity. That is just one factor. So it will be total output over the inputs as a single or partial factorial productivity measurement. We could also measure productivity by looking at the multi-factor approach, where we are looking at total factor productivity, where we look at total outputs divided by inputs, because here we are looking at multi-factors, so we will have inputs from one factor and inputs from another factor. For instance, you could be measuring labor productivity, and at the same time, you are measuring the value added or added value. So that way, you find you have two factors. And that's why you see on the denominator, we have input 1 and input 2. Then we could measure total productivity, which is total output divided by total inputs. That will give us the result for total productivity. To understand this better, let's move to the next slide. We look at methodologies of measurement. We have two methods there. We measure productivity using output-based methodology or behavioral methodologies. Under behavioral methodologies, we are looking at absenteeism, for instance, employee absenteeism. We are looking at timeliness. We are looking at customer satisfaction, for instance. On the side of output-based methodologies, we are looking at physical measurement or monetary measurement. Under physical measurement, we are looking at units per hour or units per workers or tons per machine per hour. Under monetary measurements, we could be looking at added value, which is added value per worker, or we could look at added value divided by fixed assets, or added value divided by labor cost. We could look at all that. Under monetary measurement, we could also look at total output by way of calculating total output per worker or total output divided by fixed assets. All these are different methodologies of measuring productivity. I hope I've not lost most of us. I know we HRs don't like so much detail on numbers. We don't have the numbers here. We are just talking about the methods, but essentially, one should look out for the data and then be able to do the calculation. Now, let's understand the concepts. When we talk about added value, we are talking about the increase in market value resulting from an alteration in the form, location, or availability of a product or service, excluding the cost of brought-in materials or services. In short, it is called BIMS, brought-in materials or services. Or we can talk about added value by way of looking at the wealth that the company has been able to create by its own and its employees' efforts. We could also look at financial value newly created by the internal activities of an enterprise in the process of production and added to the original raw materials which are purchased from outside. When we look at the calculation, how it is done, calculation of added value, that will become clearer. So the calculation of added value, one approach, one method, we can look at added value being equal to total outputs minus brought in materials and services, the beams. Or we can look at the second way of calculating, which is called the wealth distribution approach. The first one is wealth generation approach. The second one is wealth distribution approach. We can look at added value being equal to labor cost plus depreciation plus taxes plus interest plus profit. That is the wealth distribution method of calculation of added value. I don't want to lose most of you. So we look at terminologies that we are using in calculating the productivity. We have looked at added value. Now we look at other terminologies such as total output. How do we calculate total output? We are looking at net sales plus closing stocks of finished goods plus work in progress closing minus work in progress opening plus on construction plus income from sales of goods purchased in same condition plus income from services rendered. And then the beams, now what we are calling brought in materials and services, it refers to all materials and services purchased by the company and materials consumed, plus supplies, consumables, printing and lubricants, plus cost of goods sold in same condition, plus utilities, plus payment of contracts, plus payment for industrial work done by others, and stores and supplies. That is what we mean by beams, brought in materials and services. Then labor costs. When we talk about labor costs, and I know we HR are very conversant with this, it refers to wages and salaries, including commissions, bonuses, and benefits. Remuneration paid to working directors, proprietors, partners, and any benefits in kind paid by employers. That is what we consider under labor costs. Let's take an example. If we want to calculate labor productivity, for instance, scenario number 1, we can take total output per employee, which is TO, or total output, over E, standing for employees. And this will give us the sizes of output generated by each employee of the enterprise. We can also look at added value per employee, the AV over E. That is added value per employee. And this one will reflect the amount of wealth created by the company relative to the number of employees it has. I think we are conversant with this, the added value. You are looking at what you have created in terms of the profits and dividing with the number of employees. Okay, number 3, we can look at labor productivity by looking at added value per labor cost. That is labor productivity, which measures how much added value is produced by each unit of labor cost. Then we can look at labor productivity index, which compares labor output index and labor input index against a base year. Base year is where we were talking about baseline, the year when you are starting, where you were. So if we come to labor productivity index, you take labor output index divided by labor input index. And then if you want to calculate the output index, you look at added value in a given year divided by added value in a base year, you multiply by 100. If you want to look at input index, you will look at labor input in a given year divided by labor input in a base year, what you had as the baseline. Now, another single factor when we are calculating capital productivity alone as a single factor, we are looking at added value per fixed asset, which will give us added value generated per dollar, but in our case, we talk about Kenya shillings, yeah, of fixed asset. Secondly, we can look at total outputs per fixed asset. And this will give us total output created per Kenya shilling of fixed asset investment. Number 3, we can look at fixed assets per employee. And this will give us amount of fixed assets allocated to each employee. We calculate the value of it, what is allocated to each employee. They are not hard calculations, by the way. We can look at other ratios related to productivity. For instance, percentage materials consumed, where we will look at materials consumed divided by total input times 100. And this will give us the ratio, which indicates the amount of materials consumed as a percentage in total output. And number 2, we can look at utilities by way of looking at, percentage utilities, where we look at utilities divided by total input times 100. And this will give us a ratio of the amount of utilities as a percentage in total input. We could also look at percentage of material consumed in total output, where we look at material consumed divided by total output times 100. And this ratio indicates the amount of materials consumed in generating the output of an enterprise. The big story here is to get the data. Once you get the data, you'll be able to calculate all this. We look at productivity improvement techniques. How can we improve productivity? So some of the techniques that we can use to improve productivity is 1, reducing cost without affecting output. And that is what is shown in red. Meaning we are not affecting output, as you can see, but we are reducing inputs. When we reduce inputs, it impacts on productivity positively, because inputs mean the costs, the resources that are going in. Then number 2, we can increase output at a faster rate than input, where we are looking at outputs going up at a faster rate and at a faster rate than the inputs. Increasing outputs at a faster rate than inputs. Again, when we talk about inputs, we are talking about the cost of the resources. Increasing output with same inputs level or levels. So the inputs remain constant, but we are able to increase the outputs. We are able to work smart and increase the outputs. Then the fourth scenario is where we reduce inputs. Reducing input use faster than outputs. So the inputs go down faster than the outputs. That way, we shall still have productivity. We shall still improve productivity. So with this scenario, you can see why most employers are concerned with the cost reduction, because they need to improve on productivity. And these are the techniques, as we have seen, 4 of them. Now, from there, we change gear and look at productivity improvement tools. And I know most of us are familiar with this. The basic tools include the 5S. And the 5S stands for what? Somebody unmute yourself and tell us 5S what it stands for. It is one of the basic tools for improving productivity. 5S. Someone? Okay. 5S stands for sorting, meaning eliminating clutter. Then setting in order is the next S, or that is about creating storage. And then the third S is shine, meaning clean. The fourth one is standardize, meaning you standardize the procedures that you have taken under the first and second S. And third one, then we come to sustain, which is the fifth one, which means making what you have already done under the other S's to be part of the company culture. You sustain it as a culture. So that is what 5S means. Then we have QC, which stands for quality circles. And quality circles, we are talking about a group of employees who perform similar tasks at work, who regularly meet at workplace and detect or analyze workplace problems and devise solutions to these problems. And then implementation and monitoring is done. So that is what a quality circle does. A group of employees who perform similar tasks at workplace, who regularly meet at workplace and detect and analyze workplace problems, and then they devise solutions to the problems. And then they implement the solutions and monitor the progress. That is what we talk about when we talk about quality circles. And then SS, suggestion schemes. Suggestion schemes are, we are talking about a program which asks employees to submit their suggestions on how to improve the company products and services. The company then evaluates the suggestions and decides which ones to implement. These are basic tools. Then we have LMC, which is Labor Management Cooperation. And for Labor Management Cooperation is an intensive program designed to facilitate the union management partnership. That is what we mean by Labor Management Cooperation. It is also another tool, a basic tool for improving performance, because we know very well when there are union issues, performance will be, productivity will be affected. So it is one basic way of improving productivity at the workplace. Then we have industrial engineering. And under industrial engineering, we are talking about engineers who collect data on processes and production. They devise efficient systems that integrate workers, machines, materials, information, and energy to make a product or produce a service. So that is what industrial engineers do, which is another way of productivity improvement. Then we have moral surveys, moral surveys. And this is about carrying out surveys, which is done mostly by HR. And the survey data is used to understand and measure the attitude of individuals and groups. So those are basic tools for improving productivity, but we have advanced tools. And under the advanced ones, we have TQM, the total quality management. And remember, we said quality is defined by the customer. It is not for the organization, it is not for HR to define quality. It is not for the department responsible for the core business. No, quality is defined by the customer. So TQM is a management approach, which is a long-term approach that is done through customer satisfaction. And in TQM effort, we have all members of an organization participating in improving processes, products, services, and the culture at the workplace. We have 4 pillars for TQM, which is customer focus. We have continuous improvement. We have employee involvement, and a process-oriented approach. So all the 4 pillars go towards productivity improvement through TQM. Then BPR is another advanced tool for productivity improvement. And the BPR is about, first of all, BPR stands for Business Process Reengineering, and it focuses on optimizing end-to-end processes and eliminating redundancies. That is what it is about. So reviewing the processes and optimizing the end-to-end productivity and eliminating redundancies. Then we have BM, which is benchmarking, and we are all familiar with the benchmarking. It is the practice of comparing business processes and performing metrics to industry bests and best practices from other companies. So what we are saying here is we look at the best practices in other companies and we adopt them. But what is important under benchmarking, and we need to note this, all of us, you don't just benchmark. After benchmarking, you look for something called the best fit. You need to customize it to your organization. So you have to look at best fit for your organization so that you don't just carry everything that you have carried from the benchmarking report. So best fit is the inward here. You bring the best fit to your organization. You establish the best fit, and that is what you implement in your organization. Then we have BSC, which stands for Balanced Scorecard. I think most of us are familiar with that. And I believe we are also familiar with the perspectives for Balanced Scorecard. We have financial perspective, we have business processes, we have customer, we have organizational learning. So using the Balanced Scorecard tool, we measure all that. We have financial measures, we have business process measures, we have customer satisfaction measures, we have organizational learning, so that we are able to balance all the business perspectives or all the business aspects, so that the business is able to become productive. We have the the ISO 2015, the QMS, that is Quality Management System. And under ISO, we also have ISO 30401 of 2018, which is knowledge management. And knowledge management is about acquisition, retention, and use of knowledge in an organization. And it aims at instilling knowledge management culture. Then we have other standards like the ISO 22301 of 2019, which is business continuity management, which focuses on organizational resilience to ensure there's continuity or provision of goods and services in the event of disruption. Like we had an experience during COVID, many businesses collapsed because they did not have BCM in place, as in business continuity management program in place. So we also have another ISO standard, which is ISO 27001 of 2013, that is management systems, which is about preservation of confidentiality, integrity, and availability of information. This is mainly on information. So what some organizations have done is to integrate all those ISO standards in order to improve productivity. They are very powerful tools, by the way. We move to GIT, just in time, as a tool for productivity improvement. Just in time is about procurement of materials, and it's about the inventory management. It's an inventory management strategy that requires working closely with suppliers so that raw materials arrive as productive. They are aligned to productive schedule so that we are able to have the minimum amount of inventory on hand to meet the demand, so that we don't store a lot of inventory. We use the GIT so that the inventory is aligned, the supply of the inventory is aligned to the production schedule, so that we receive the materials when we are ready to use them. Then we have the Six Sigma, which is the last one on this productivity improvement tools. And Six Sigma refers to a statistical measure of how far a process deviates from perfection. And it focuses on producing no defects. It's a process that operates at Six Sigma has failure rate of only 0.00034%, which means virtually no defects. That is what Six Sigma aims at. So these are very powerful tools. And from there, we move to Kaizen. Kaizen is a Japanese concept, which means continual improvement. And the steps under Kaizen, we have step number 1, where we find out the problems. What are the problems in materials, in man, in machine, in method? That is the 4 M's. We try to establish or to identify the problems. Then step number 2, we try to understand the current status of the problem in terms of quality, cost, and delivery, the QCD we were talking about. We also look at safety, morale, and time. So we try to understand what is the current status of the problem. Morale is here because we are also looking at man. Man is the people, the employees. Number 3, we set targets or goals. That is where we make plans on how we are going to improve, because it's all about continual improvement. Then number 4, we analyze causal factors by using the fishbone diagram. And then number 5, we develop corrective actions. And number 6, we implement corrective actions. Number 7 is confirmation of corrective actions and effects or results. And then number 8, we standardize. Number 9, we prepare future plans and implementations. We scale up our implementation. So that is about the steps for Kaizen. And when you look at it keenly, you realize that indeed it is aimed at continual improvement. If one is able to follow all those many steps, then you realize that you will have improved on productivity. It is a very powerful tool. And in Kenya here, I know Toyota uses the Kaizen. Which other organization? Can we share experiences? Which other organization uses Kaizen? I know of Toyota Kenya. Okay, then we change gear and move to factors affecting employee productivity. And for us as CHRPs, I know we understand these factors very well. The clarity of goals. Employees will become productive if they are clear about the goals, because then they are able to remain focused on the goals. And is the reason each employee at the workplace needs to have a job description first and foremost, so that they can understand what is required, what is expected of them at the workplace. And then with regard to the performance management, we said we look at the setting of goals, the clarity of it. We look at objectives. What are the objectives that we are going to pursue during the performance year? And then we look at the targets. And then we discuss the key performance indicators on how we are going to measure the performance. So employees need to be very clear about the goals in order to remain focused in their work. Then we look at job interests and challenges. So we need to address this. If employees have challenges, we need to address them, and we need to be sure that they are interested in their role, because it is possible to place someone in a role where they may be qualified, but they are not quite interested. So as HR, we need to address that and look at which is the other role that we can deploy them into and make them to be more productive. Then we look at rewards and sanctions. We discussed this when we were discussing performance management, and we cannot really underrate it. It is a factor that every organization needs to consider, because if we do not reward good performance, then we are discouraging the high performers to just become mediocre, because they will say, in this organization, it doesn't matter whether you work hard, whether you perform or you don't perform. Then we look at feedback and communication, which is very key. We also discussed it during performance management when we went through performance management slides. We said what gets done and is fed back, it gets done better. And where there's communication, so that if there are any gaps, if there are any areas of improvement, then the supervisor and the employee are able to discuss and be able to address it. Then working relationships. It is said that people don't quit organizations, they quit bad managers. So the working relationships are very key. It is always good to foster good working relationships. and to confine ourselves to matters that are official, so that we don't get outside and begin discussing matters that are outside the official realm. So relationships, working relationships are very important. But I'm not saying we should not understand our employees properly right from their home, what they are experiencing at their homes. Sometimes that may affect work, because if the home environment is not friendly, then that may affect the work and the employee may become less productive. So it is good we understand employees even right from their homes, but it's not good also to get personal. So we need to look into the relationships to ensure that our working relationships are good. Number 6, at the advancement and mobility. Here we look at the career growth, which is very key. If someone is performing in a particular role and they perform year in, year out, and there's no mobility, like I know in most of the public organizations, sometimes mobility is not easy, even in some of the private organizations where we have flat structures, flat organizational structures. Mobility becomes a problem. Career advancement may become a problem. You work on a particular role for years and years and nothing, there's no mobility, no advancement. So we need to look into this. And in the public sector, what I would advise, what I would say, it is better to broaden the grading structure, broadening the grading structure so that it will have many grades and the people are able now to climb and grow from one grade to another. But having a flat structure can be very tricky, because then it becomes a dead end. You find that it is very hard to advance in career. You may pay someone a lot of money, but then money is not all that is required. For employees to be motivated, they need much more than money. Then we look at management credibility. You know, management must walk the talk. If management does not set the tone, then you will find that affects employee productivity, because employees will not, the management will not model out, they will not be role models to the employees. They will not model out the culture for the organization. And so the employees will now get a bit derailed, and then that will affect the productivity. Then we look at personal development. Personal development is where we are looking at whether this employee has all the competencies and the skills required for that particular role. They can take initiative to develop themselves. That is where personal development comes in, which is very key at the workplace. Then we look at loyalty and commitment. Our employees, are they loyal to the organization? Are they committed to their work? That is also very key. Are they likely to recommend your organization to someone else who is looking for a job? That has to do with the loyalty, which is very key. Because if an employee does not have the loyalty and the commitment for their at the workplace, then you find they are not going to be productive at the workplace. So those are some of the factors. Indeed, the factors can be many, but those are the key ones that may affect employee productivity. And because we said both productivity and performance, the end goal is results. So the same factors will also affect employee performance, not only productivity. Then we change gear and come to waste. As we discuss productivity management, it is very important for us to ensure that we control the costs. And we cannot control the costs if we are not minimizing on waste, or if we are not managing the waste. And at the workplace, we have different types of wastes. One is transport, where we have unnecessary movement of employees. Okay, movement may not necessarily mean moving using the cars or the motor vehicles. It may mean also deployment, where we move employees unnecessarily, or materials or customers. That may lead to waste. Another type of waste is inventory, where we are looking at excess stock or finished goods, or we are looking at work in progress, having backlogs of vouchers and approvals, and obsolete databases. That can also be a waste of inventory. So that's another type of waste. Then we come to motion or movement. Any movement not directly related to adding value to a product or service may lead to extended production time. So we need to ensure that all movements are geared towards minimizing the production time so that we can have a shorter turnaround time. We come to waiting. Waiting is about idle time or downtime created for machines, employees, and customers. For instance, waiting for equipment, approvals of memos, vouchers, information from seniors. You know, like in the public sector, there are bureaucracies, so that approvals take rather long. Even a memo from a CEO can take so long to reach the person who is at the lowest level. So that is called waiting, and it can also lead or affect productivity negatively. There's overproduction. Overproduction can be of products or services. We are looking at leads to inventory, loss of money, shortage of space, quality problems. If there's overproduction, for instance, and someone is engaged in manufacturing industry, you realize that you will have shortage of space where to store those goods. And if we are looking at the aspect of finances or inventory, we are looking at leads to inventory. That is production, that is overproduction, which would lead to, like, if it is on matters of inventory, you realize if goods and services are oversupplied, then we have a problem also there of storage. Then we have quality problems because of overproduction, because it is likely that the production processes are not the standard operating procedures are not followed properly. And so that will affect the quality of goods and services. Then we have overprocessing. That is unnecessary actions or steps in the production of goods or products or services, which is again caused by SOP. SOP stands for Standard Operating Procedures. Lack of standard operating procedures, lack of unclear customer specifications, lack of that is not lack of, but poor training and unclear communication from supervisors to workers. So that can lead to a problem also, especially when it comes to service. It can lead to a lot of waste on time, or where you find there's duplication we have situations where people duplicate the processes. Then we have the waste in terms of defects, where we have incorrect or incomplete work sent to the next step in the process or to the customer, whether internal or external. This leads to reworks that cost money and time. Defects leading to scrap. Reworks, so the process has to be repeated. The failure to get it right the first time. So when we talk about improvement tools, productivity improvement tools such as TQM, it would be applicable here, so that whatever someone does, they get it right the first time. They don't have to rework. There are no defects. Then when it comes to skills, we can also have a waste, where we talk about failure to make use of all employees' knowledge, skills, and abilities. The failure to use customers to do online tasks to free employees. So we need to be keen to ensure that we utilize or we optimize on our employee skills, because failure to do that then would be a waste. It can also, we can have a waste in terms of skills if we deploy people in the wrong areas or the wrong roles to perform the wrong jobs. By wrong, I mean a job for which they are not qualified, and yet they are qualified in another role, and we are not deploying them into that role. So that would lead to a waste of the skills. So with that, then we change gear and move to monitoring, evaluation, and reporting. So under monitoring, we say monitoring is a continuous observation and checking procedure on the progress of ongoing activities. That is what monitoring is. So in monitoring, we compare progress of activities against milestones and timeliness for decision making. We also compare estimates and actual costs against its approved budget. And so we look at what is it that we are monitoring. So what is it we monitor? We monitor inputs because we are keen to ensure that the costs are managed, or we are keen to ensure that we optimize on utilization of resources. So we monitor the inputs. And we said earlier on, inputs could be in terms of raw materials, in terms of time, in terms of money that is paid in salaries. All those are inputs. Then we look at processes. Processes need to be monitored to ensure that they are effective, to ensure there's no duplication, to ensure that everything is done the right way. And if there's need for improvement, then we talked about BPR, which looks into improvement of the processes, carrying out BPR, the business process reengineering. Then on progress, we need to monitor progress so that if there are any gaps, we are able to take action on that. We take corrective measures. Then we need to monitor outputs and be able to be sure that they tally or they tie up to our targets as set. We need to monitor budgets because this is about money. We cannot carry out a project without budget. So that is very key. It is something worth monitoring. to ensure that we don't exceed the set budgets. We need to monitor customer satisfaction because the customer is key. We need to give our customers a good experience. We need to be customer-centric and be able to carry out customer satisfaction surveys to be sure that we are on track. We need to monitor service delivery because if we don't deliver goods and services on a timely manner, then we cannot be able to satisfy our customers. Because much as we talk about cost, we talk about quality, delivery is key when it comes to productivity. The QCD, quality, costs, and delivery. So service delivery. If we are in a manufacturing industry, then we need to monitor the delivery of our products. We come to evaluation, and we say evaluation is a systematic objective examination of the performance and productivity indicators and delivery of overall organizational goals, objectives, and targets. That is what evaluation is. So what is it that we evaluate? It is important to evaluate projects, to evaluate programs, to evaluate services, to evaluate processes and conditions, so as to be able to identify the gaps and be able to take corrective action. When it comes to the goals, objectives, and targets, the evaluation can be easily done using the indicators that are set, that are agreed upon. The indicators, especially the KPIs, will be able to track the achievement of the targets and the attainment of the objectives. We look at the 10 steps of designing, building, and sustaining a productivity monitoring and evaluation system. So we have 10 steps here. And the first step is conducting a readiness assessment. As in, how ready are we to be able to carry out productivity monitoring? In readiness, we need to be sure that we have the human resource to carry out that. We have a budget that is set for monitoring and evaluation and all other resources that are required. Step number 2, we agree on outcomes to monitor and evaluate. What are the outcomes? When we were discussing the result chain, we said that when we talk about outcomes, something must have been modified, something must have increased, something must have decreased, either decreased, increased, either way, something must have been modified. So we look at outcomes. And some of the outcomes we are looking at our customer satisfaction. We are looking at other outcomes in form of revenue, the increase in revenue. We are looking at decrease in defects or the scrap work. So something has increased or decreased, something has been modified. So we need to agree on what is it that we are going to monitor and evaluate in terms of outcomes. Then when it comes to selecting key performance indicators, that is step number 3. Key performance indicators. And the word itself speaks for itself. What is key? We are not looking at all indicators. We have to agree on what are the key indicators that we are going to use to measure the attainment of our objectives or the achievement of our goals. So in terms of key performance indicators, depending on what we are going to measure, we can have key performance indicators that are lagging or key performance indicators that are leading. I believe we have all heard about leading and lagging KPIs. We also have KPIs that are quantifiable and KPIs that are qualitative, that can only be given in a descriptive manner. For instance, if you want to measure corruption perception in a public organization, you are looking into perceptions, people's perceptions, opinions. So that is more qualitative. You find the data that you collect will be more qualitative. So you will use qualitative measures such as perception index, corruption perception index, if you are measuring corruption. And if you are measuring employee satisfaction, you will look at employee satisfaction index. And the indices are in form of percentages. So you will calculate the percentage from the descriptive data or the qualitative data that you will have collected. If we are measuring outcomes that are rather quantifiable, then it will be easy. Like if we are measuring on products, we are looking at, first of all, the outputs that are there. Then we look at the outcomes. What has changed? Have those outcomes, have those outputs led to the outcomes that we want, like in terms of quality? Have they increased the quality of our products? Have they reduced the rejections and the returns, the reworks? The suppliers' quality, the incoming supplies, are they of high quality? Have they increased the yield? The yield is percentage of products that are correctly produced. So have they increased the yield? We need to agree and select the correct indicators when it comes to monitoring outputs, outcomes. Then number 4, we look at the baseline data on indicators. That is where we are today. It is important to understand where we are today. That is the baseline data, to have the baseline data, which will help us now set realistic targets. Because if you do not know where you are today, you are likely to set targets that are either too low or too high. That is how the baseline data helps. Then we move to planning for improvement by selecting results and targets. So we plan for improvement. And in that results chain, we look at what do we want to measure. Do we want to measure output? That is, are we just measuring activities and the outputs? Or do we want to measure the outcomes? Or do we want to measure the impact? And then we set the targets for it. Step number 6 is for monitoring for results. So now we continue monitoring. That is measuring, identifying gaps, knowing where we are vis-a-vis where we wanted to be. And then step number 7, we look at the role of evaluation. So we are evaluating the results and filling in the gaps so that we are able to improve on productivity. The next point is reporting findings. Collecting all this data, measuring and doing everything is all aimed at giving us a good report findings that can be implemented, findings that will help the organization move forward. If the findings show that we have already hit our targets, for instance, in terms of the outcomes that we had projected or the impact, then we are able now to set even higher targets. Because when it comes to performance and productivity, it never reaches a point where people say we have arrived. No, we always aim at continual improvement. So the report comes and shows that we are doing very well. That does not mean we stop there. We have to reinvent ourselves. We have to set new targets and set new benchmarks so that we are able now to pursue that. When it comes to step number 9, we are talking about using the findings. And I think I've explained this. So we use the findings to take the necessary action, the corrective action, so that we are able to fill in the gaps that have been identified, or we are able to modify our processes, we are able to re-engineer our processes, we are able to take corrective action, we improve on our quality if the findings show that our quality is poor. If our findings show that our costs are too high, the cost for production, then we are able to implement some techniques to reduce on costs. If we realize that we are not able to get to or to make any impact on our society, then we are able now to focus on that and be able to put in stringent measures that can be able to lead to impact evaluation. So step number 10, we are looking at sustaining the monitoring and evaluation system within the organization, which is very key. So we go back to the step number 1 and continue improving on each stage. And that way we sustain the M&D systems and we ensure we allocate sufficient resources to be able to monitor and track our productivity or track our performance. And that way our organization is able to improve on productivity. The next slide, we have George Bernard Shaw, who lived between 1856 and 1950. What George Bernard Shaw said is that the only man who behaves sensibly is his tailor. He said, the tailor takes measurements anew every time he sees him, while all the rest go on with their old measurements and expect him to fit in them. So what does that mean? It means that taking measurements is very key. Yeah, because it is the one that informs us on where we are. Yeah, so if a tailor does not take your measurements every time you go to fit something or to have something made, so you realize that it may turn out not to be the best fit for you, or may turn out not to be the quality that you wanted. So measurement, this slide is emphasizing on why it is important to take measurements or to carry out measurements, to measure productivity, to measure performance. Very important. Because then we wouldn't know whether we have achieved what we wanted. We wouldn't know where we are in comparison with our competitors. We wouldn't know where we are in achievement of our goals. We would just be like driving a car while closing the eyes. We would just be blind because measurements bring out data. And this data is very key. It helps us now to know, to evaluate, and to monitor our performance and be able to know where we are, whether we are on track or whether we are a bit lost. And if we are, then we put in measures to correct that. So with that, that brings us to the end of the presentation. And I now invite questions. As we had agreed, we said we push all the questions to the end because I knew most of them would be addressed during the presentation. So can we have questions, please? Questions? Questions, audience? Okay, if there are no questions, then we stop it at that.
Maybe a question.
Yes.
I'm looking at a scenario.
Yes.
Maybe to do with the rewards and the sanctions.
Yes.
Now you have a scenario of where an employee probably seems to be the best performing every year.
Yes.
And of course, the output and the statistics show that the employee is performing. But how
Yes.
do you also bring on board
Yes.
without really looking like you're rewarding the same person every year, but also
Yes.
not being biased? Because the moment you stop recognizing this person, probably
Yes.
their output may go down. But you also want
Yes.
to encourage the others to
Yes.
also up their performance. So how
Yes.
do you balance that without being seen to be not equitable, but also bringing on board that motivation for others also to improve their performance?
Okay, that's a very good question. First of all, we say that figures don't lie. So our objective, our performance management tool should be highly objective to the extent that nobody will cast doubt as to whether you are favoring someone or not favoring them. And that is number one. Number two, so what I'm saying, in other words, is that because figures don't lie, if this person continues excelling, we may just have to continue rewarding them. But I understand your point that that may also demoralize others who may feel like, when will our time come? When are we going to be rewarded also? So I think on that one, the first thing that needs to be done is to first of all find out why is the performance of those other employees not up to standard? Why is it not up to the benchmark or not up to the targets that you have set? Because targets will tell us how good performance looks like. That is why we set targets, and that is the purpose of a target. It will tell us how good performance looks like. What will be there to show that we have actually reached where we wanted to be. So probably you may need to find out why the rest of the employees are not up to the task, or why their performance is not up to the level of this other one. And how can that be done? Probably you can have a discussion, or the supervisor may need to have a discussion with the employee and try to find out and narrow down why their performance is not up to the expected level. And that is the more reason when we are managing performance, we need to monitor even before we come to the appraisals. We need to continue monitoring the performance during the performance period, so that when it comes to evaluating the performance, we do not surprise the employee. There are no surprises. For instance, if an employee is handling customers, just an example, if their role is such that they are handling customers, In the process of monitoring this employee performance, you need to document the milestones. You document the milestones, and at the same time, you document incidents. You document incidents because when it comes to performance evaluation, the employee may say that unanionea. My supervisor doesn't like me. My supervisor seems to have issues with me. So how do you circumvent that? For instance, if on a material day that the employee mishandles a customer, just an example, then you need to call them to your office and tell them that you have recorded what has happened, but you ask them to change, and you coach them on how to handle customers in a better way. If they have handled the customer in a very good way and there's a compliment to that, you also need to now say it publicly. Good things we say publicly. But if you have to correct an employee, then you call them to your office because that can affect their morale. So it is a good thing, now publicize it so that the employee feels like continuing to do much better. If it is something you need to correct them on, like if they have mishandled a customer, call them to your office. Now that becomes, first of all, a matter between you and him or her. So once you establish why these other employees are not up to the task, then in case they lack some resources, because somebody may fail to perform because of several reasons, like they do not have the requisite tools that they need, or they are supposed to travel and they don't have the transport, that kind of thing. So you look into resources, you look into the discussion will bring out many things, because if the employee is open to you, in case there are other issues touching on their performance or why they are not productive, then you'll be able to zero in on that. And that's why at the workplace, we also have counseling services to handle issues that have to do with counseling. If they lack skills, then you encourage the employee to do personal development, or you as the employer, because we HRs are the employer, you see how you can, when you are carrying out your TNA, you see how that can pop up so that you are able to train those employees on the competencies or the skills that they need. That would be my response, but I open it up to any other person to add. Has that adequately responded to the issue? Hello?
I think it responds to it.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you.
It is open if we can have other inputs to that. Okay, or we can have another question. We still have a few minutes. Or I can ask also, how did you find especially the measuring of the measurements for productivity? Did it sound too hard? People are quiet today.
Yeah, they're not easy, a bit hard.
They are not easy.
I think it needs a bit of more focus and in-depth looking into it, considering that depending on the organization and what it does, also being
Yes.
able to pick what appropriately fits the organization.
Okay. That's good. I appreciate that. I truly appreciate that. Let me look at the charts. Kindly, can you take us briefly on scorecard? Okay, the person who asked, are you still here? Scorecard. I don't know whether
Yes,
the
I am.
person. Okay. Okay, so scorecard, we are looking at the tool that you are using for measuring performance, isn't it? So if you are using the balance scorecard, then we are looking at the 4 perspectives, which we said is a financial perspective. We are looking at a customer perspective. We are looking at internal processes, and we are looking at learning and growth. So depending on the KPIs that you have set to measure that, then you will be able now to have your scorecard ready. We can have someone else also explain that. That would be my take. Any other participant who has something to say on that? Or what exactly on scorecard would you want us to focus on? My sister, Lorna. Is it Lorna? Okay, someone else was asking, I mean balance scorecard. Oh, okay, you meant balance scorecard. I think I've explained it. So balance scorecard looks at the totality of that. And the in thing is to know what objectives you are pursuing and how you measure that. The objectives and how you measure that, the KPIs. We can have another session, maybe if time allows another day, we look at how to develop KPIs, the key performance indicators. If the admin allows us and if we get time for that, we can look at that. Any other?
Mine, I would like to really thank you for taking us through. I enjoyed the way you are delivering, and I could feel given more time. We could even have gone through one or two examples. You have that ability. I thank you, and I believe the others feel that there's value in this.
Yes, thank you very much, my sister. Actually, this is a presentation that takes a whole week. We pick on one item, we analyze it properly, we go through it, we give examples. It can take a whole week. And I know on performance, we are not, I know most of us are conversant and we are doing performance management in our organizations, but productivity management, very few organizations are doing it. So that's an area where we needed to give examples, and indeed examples are there. It is only that time could not allow. Any other comment? I can see people are still resilient. Jonathan, Miriam, there's one that is, okay, that is admin, myself. Most of us have left. Or they are still there. I can see other, I don't know whether other is still there. Lorna, are you still there? Mary, Hannah, Leah, Dixon, Robert. You are here. Okay, great. So any comment, any question is welcome because we have come to the tail end of the presentation.